They smile, they comfort, they speak of compassion, fairness, and peace. But behind those gentle words, behind the soft glow of virtue, hides the most effective weapon ever crafted, the illusion of goodness. This isn't about cynicism, this is about clarity, because in a world ruled by perception, the most dangerous person you'll ever meet isn't the monster, it's the saint, the people who wear kindness like a badge, who speak endlessly about values, ethics, and justice, are often the ones you must watch the most closely, not because goodness itself is evil, but because nothing hides intent more effectively than the appearance of moral purity. Let's break down 5 brutal truths not taught in classrooms, not discussed in polite society about how goodness can be used as a tool of control, deception, and domination. The illusion is stronger than the truth. People don't see reality. They see what they're shown, and when someone is wrapped in the cloak of virtue, when they speak the right words, support the right causes, and show the right emotions, they're seen as trustworthy. Without proof, without examination, the world wants to believe in good people. It needs to, because it makes us feel safe. But that need is a weakness. It creates blind spots. It allows people with agendas to walk straight into positions of power, welcomed, praised, and never doubted. Because a truly dangerous person doesn't need to control you with fear. They can control you with hope, and hope, once weaponized, becomes a leash that people place around their own necks. When someone appears to represent goodness, people turn off their instincts. They stop questioning. They assume motives are pure, actions are just, intentions are honest, but appearances lie, and the better the lie, the more comforting it feels. How goodness becomes immunity. Once someone is seen as good, they become untouchable. Not because they are beyond reproach, but because any attack on them looks like an attack on virtue itself. This is how people gain moral immunity. They do not silence critics through argument. They do it through guilt. Because if someone has helped others, spoken kindly, donated, marched, preached, then how dare you question them? This is how power hides in plain sight. A tyrant rules with force, a manipulator rules with goodness. Because if you believe someone is inherently good, you will explain away everything they do. They fired that employee, must have been a good reason. They changed their stance, must be evolving. They punished someone harshly. Surely it was deserved. This is how reputations become armor, and the stronger the armor, the more damage they can do behind it, unseen, unchallenged, unpunished. How virtue becomes leverage. Imagine walking into a room with someone everyone respects. Someone seen as kind, wise, balanced. Now imagine disagreeing with them out loud. You won't just be seen as wrong, you'll be seen as rude, aggressive, problematic. Because you didn't just challenge a person, you challenged a symbol. You challenged what they represent. This is how goodness becomes leverage. The person who wears virtue as a mask doesn't need to win arguments. They simply need to create an environment where disagreeing with them feels immoral. And once morality is on their side, they can silence opposition without lifting a finger. Their followers will do it for them. Their supporters will explain away every flaw, because they don't want the illusion to break. They don't want to believe the person they trust is playing a game. But here's the truth. The person who uses goodness as a weapon doesn't see themselves as evil. They see themselves as righteous, which makes them even more dangerous. Because they'll burn down your life and sleep like a baby convinced they did the right thing. Goodness as a battlefield. In the art of war, there are 2 ways to win. Dominate your enemy or disarm them before the fight begins. The latter is far more elegant and far more effective. A good image disarms. A good story seduces. A good narrative makes people surrender before they know they're in a fight. That's what the moral figure does. They operate on a different battlefield, not with swords or laws, but with emotion, perception, and belief. And here's the trap. If you criticize them even for good reason, you risk becoming the villain. You become the jealous one, the bitter one, the ungrateful. You become the problem, because the person you're opposing is not just a person anymore, they're a symbol. And in a world obsessed with optics, symbols win. The betrayal of the righteous. Here's the final, most painful truth. The one who will betray you hardest, the one who will cut deepest, is the one who believes they are doing the right thing because they won't feel guilt. They won't hesitate, they'll sleep peacefully, knowing they had to do it. You were toxic, you were selfish, you were in the way. This is the betrayal of the righteous, the moment when someone trades you for their own legacy and feels heroic doing it. And if you trusted them blindly, if you believed the performance, if you fell in love with the story they told about themselves, then you won't just feel betrayed, you'll feel foolish, and that shame will keep you silent. But it shouldn't, because clarity is not cruelty, doubt is not disloyalty, skepticism is not sin, it's survival. You might wonder, why does this illusion of goodness work so well? The answer lies deep within human nature itself. From childhood, we are taught to trust those who show kindness, to respect those who speak of fairness and justice. We're conditioned to equate virtue with safety and kindness with truth. It's a survival mechanism that has helped humanity form communities, build bonds, and cooperate in ways no other species has. But like all survival mechanisms, it comes with vulnerabilities, blind spots that can be exploited by those skilled enough to cloak their intentions behind the mask of virtue. When someone speaks with the language of morality, it triggers an almost reflexive trust. Their words resonate with the values ingrained in us, stirring empathy and hope. This immediate emotional response bypasses rational scrutiny. We want to believe. We crave heroes, saviors, champions of the good. So, when someone steps into that role convincingly, we often surrender our skepticism without realizing it. This is the foundation of their power. The person who understands this dynamic can manipulate it to extraordinary effect. The dangerous part is that this manipulation doesn't always feel like manipulation. It often feels like leadership, guidance, even salvation. When you think of a leader or influencer wrapped in virtue, you imagine a protector, someone who has your best interests at heart. This assumption can make it nearly impossible to see the cracks beneath the surface. And when those cracks do show, the illusion is so strong that the collective mind bends to preserve it, sometimes even at the expense of truth and justice. Consider the way this plays out in social and political spheres. Charismatic figures rise not solely because of their policies or skills, but because they embody a narrative of goodness that resonates with their followers. They promise fairness, equality, peace, and justice. These promises are powerful because they touch upon universal desires. Yet, too often, these promises serve as a veil, behind which lies ambition, control, or self-interest. It's crucial to recognize that this isn't inherently evil or malicious. The person who wields goodness as a tool might genuinely believe in their cause or in their own righteousness. This self-belief is part of what makes them so convincing and so dangerous. They don't see themselves as deceivers, but as agents of change, even if the cost is high and the means questionable. This conviction makes their actions harder to question because it challenges the fundamental idea that good people do bad things. But the reality is that intentions, no matter how pure, don't exempt actions from consequences. When the appearance of goodness becomes a strategy rather than a sincere practice, it shifts into something else entirely, a mechanism of control. This control is subtle and often invisible, exercised not through brute force, but through the shaping of beliefs, perceptions, and social norms. It's the soft power of morality weaponized, bending minds without breaking bones. One of the most powerful tools in this arsenal is narrative control. Stories shape how we see the world. When someone controls the story, how events are framed, which details are emphasized or omitted, they control reality itself. By framing their actions as acts of virtue, they shift the focus away from scrutiny. Any dissent is painted as an attack not on them, but on goodness itself. This flips the script, making critics the villains. This psychological trick is devastating because it hijacks the natural inclination to protect the good and turns it against the truth. This is why questioning a good person or figure can feel so taboo. It's not just a social taboo, but a deeply ingrained psychological resistance. When we challenge a symbol of virtue, we face more than just the person. We face a world, you, a moral foundation we rely on to feel secure. The backlash against such challenges can be fierce and emotionally charged because it threatens the very framework people use to make sense of right and wrong. Understanding this dynamic is essential not just for political or social awareness, but for personal survival. In interpersonal relationships, the same patterns emerge. Someone who constantly presents themselves as virtuous can use that image to manipulate others emotionally and psychologically by casting themselves as the good partner, friend, or colleague. They create a moral high ground that discourages criticism or boundary setting. Challenging them can feel wrong, even when their behavior is harmful. This is why it's so important to develop what might be called moral discernment, the ability to separate genuine virtue from performative goodness. It means looking beyond appearances and slogans and paying attention to consistent actions over time. Do their behaviors align with their words? Do they accept criticism or deflect it with indignation? Do they show empathy for all people, or only for those who serve their interests? These are the questions that can help pierce the veil. Another critical factor is recognizing the role of cognitive biases that reinforce the illusion of goodness. Confirmation bias, for example, leads us to favor information that supports our existing beliefs and to dismiss information that contradicts them. When we've invested emotionally in believing someone is good, it becomes psychologically painful to accept evidence otherwise. This pain leads many to rationalize or ignore warning signs. The better the mask, the harder it is to see the face beneath. This interplay between emotion and cognition creates a fertile ground for manipulation. A skilled manipulator knows exactly which buttons to press, appealing to identity, values, fears, and hopes. They craft messages that resonate deeply and bypass critical thinking. Their charisma and moral language serve as a kind of social proof, convincing others to follow, defend, and even sacrifice for them. But the paradox is that this power is fragile. It depends entirely on the maintenance of the illusion. When cracks appear, when actions betray words or hypocrisy becomes undeniable, the entire construct can collapse swiftly and spectacularly. The fall from grace is often brutal because the higher the pedestal, the greater the distance to the ground. And for those who believe deeply, the betrayal feels like a personal wound. This is why transparency and accountability are so vital in any system of power or influence. They act as safeguards against the corruption of virtue into a tool of control. When people and institutions are open to scrutiny and willing to face consequences, the risk of illusion-based power decreases. It forces alignment between words and actions, reducing the space for deception. However, these safeguards are only effective when people remain vigilant and willing to question, even when it's uncomfortable. It requires courage to doubt those who seem good, especially when doing so risks social ostracism or internal conflict. But that courage is the price of clarity. Without it, we become passive participants in our own manipulation, handing over our judgment to the polished images crafted by others. This brings us back to the individual level. Developing personal resilience against the illusion of goodness requires cultivating critical thinking skills alongside emotional intelligence. It means learning to recognize emotional appeals without being swept away by them. It means embracing doubt as a tool, not a threat. Doubt doesn't mean rejecting everything. It means holding space for uncertainty while gathering evidence. Equally important is the practice of empathy. Not the naive, unconditional kind, but a discerning empathy that understands motivations and vulnerabilities without losing sight of truth and boundaries. Empathy can help see the humanity in everyone, including those who manipulate. It can also prevent cynicism from taking root, preserving the ability to believe in genuine goodness when it appears. At its core, this balancing act is about reclaiming agency. It's about refusing to outsource your moral compass to others, no matter how convincing their facade. It's about insisting on integrity, not just in others but within yourself. Integrity means consistency between your values, your actions, and your perceptions. It means honoring the uncomfortable questions and the inconvenient truths, because the ultimate danger of the illusion of goodness is not just that it deceives others, it's that it can deceive us into becoming complicit in systems and relationships that harm us and those we care about. It can trap us in cycles of denial, disappointment, and disempowerment. But here's the hopeful truth: clarity is possible. The veil can be lifted. When enough people choose to question, to listen to their instincts alongside reason, the power of illusion weakens. When actions are held accountable and stories are scrutinized, authenticity begins to shine through, and authenticity is the antidote to deception. It is the true power. True power doesn't need a mask. It doesn't demand blind loyalty. It welcomes questions and stands firm in transparency. So as you move forward, remember this: goodness, like any tool, can be wielded for creation or destruction. The difference lies in awareness and choice. Don't let the appearance of virtue lull you into complacency, but don't let skepticism harden you into cynicism. Instead, cultivate a clear-eyed compassion that sees beneath the surface and demands truth. That balances hope with vigilance, that honors kindness without surrendering judgment, because in the end, the greatest strength you can possess is the ability to navigate the world not as it appears, but as it really is. To see the saint and the strategist within the same face. To recognize that power is complex, that goodness is complicated, and that survival depends on clarity, not comfort.